thing is pathos. And I am going to use examples of advertisements as I'm going through this, because we're going to be using advertisements for our examples, because they're, you know, short, easy, visual examples to use and really easy to talk about, and really easy ways to notice. We're starting with pathos because I want to spend a little bit of time with it, because again, it's the one that's kind of demonized the most. It does refer to emotion, but if you think about, and one way to remember what it is that pathos relates to the audience. And sometimes people confuse pathos and ethos because of the E in emotion, like emotion, ethos, but you want to think about, like, path is the root for all of our emotion words, like sympathy, empathy, apathy, lack of emotion, pathetic, pathology. We have that root there, but it also refers to a lot of other things that are appropriate to think about. It relates to our imagination, the way we connect to each other, and our sense of humanity. Now, so one of the ways I think you can use pathos appropriately is like visual examples, visual aids, things that help us imagine the importance or depth in a situation. For example, if you're thinking about an advertisement and you're thinking about an ad, if I said, what is an ad that really evokes emotion, the first thing you'd probably think about is those ASPCA ads that have, like, they show you the sad dogs, and they have the Sarah McLachlan songs playing in the background, and the dogs are always like shaking and sick and behind cages, and you might think that that's too much, but at the same time, kind of making that point is it helps us see and visualize. And when you don't have pictures that you can show people, you'll try to use that descriptive language and imagery and things that help people see how important an issue is, or even to help see what you're talking about, because that's how we process information. Pathos is really important when it comes to teaching and helping people understand what things are and seeing the significance of it, because we think in images, we think in examples, and things that we can relate to, and that helps us make that connection, that helps us process and understand what people are talking about. It also deals with our sense of humanity, which is kind of where our emotions come in, but also like our sense of identity. Now, when you're thinking about, like, our humanity, it relates to our ability to be able to empathize with others, and the reason why it's audience is it's letting the audience see the person behind the text. Whereas, when we were talking about the antidepressants, the goal was not to see the person behind the text. When you're thinking about using pathos, you're thinking about letting them see the person behind the text and the stake and the importance of the issue, which is important when you're persuading. Some of you are raising awareness. Your goal is to get people to engage and to see how important it is. So you need imagination. You need to get the readers to care. You need them to see that you care. You need them to see your connection to the issue, and that's very important. So there are some reasons to use pathos. It's very persuasive, and it's the most abused it is, but I'm going to go through just the list of examples also down here at the bottom. So it is that appeal to emotion, like fear, humor, anger, insecurity. You'll notice in advertisements. One of my favorite examples is an advertisement. If you've ever seen, like, before and after, a before and after picture of, like, someone selling, like, a weight loss product. Think about those before and after pictures. Like, they're supposed to kind of be a good reason to say, like, well, here's proof that it works. But there's a lot of other things going on in there. Like, let's say it's a woman in the picture, you'll notice she's more, in the first one, she's more washed out. She's not wearing makeup. Her hair doesn't even look like it's been washed. She's slumped over. She's wearing frumpy clothes. She looks like more just sad about life. Cut to she's not smiling. Cut to the picture at the after picture. It's not just that she's thinner. Her posture is improved. She's smiling. Usually her teeth look whiter. There's more color in the photo in general. Her hair's been done. Like, there's more of that sense of, like, the suggestion that she is missing something in her life in the first picture, and she's found it. She's happier. and more satisfied in the second picture. So there's some like suggestive ways that we work this in. Maybe draw from spirituality, religious traditions and examples to connect with people's stories or testimonials, personal anecdotes. Your personal experience has a place in a digital essay because personal experience actually relates to all three appeals at one time, and it is possible for things to overlap, for it to make more than one appeal. Personal experience lets the reader see your humanity, so it shows your connection. It also builds your ethos, because if you also have credibility and you're using credible sources, it also helps people see how you have a potential like stake in connection and personal experience. So it can make you more trustworthy. It can also be used as a type of evidence in combination with other things. So it can relate to all three. You have to be really careful with personal experience because you don't want it to be the only thing that you're basing a point on, because it's not evidence in and of itself. It's not true because it happened to you once when you were 5, but if you have personal experience that also goes along with like expert sources, and also goes along with other stories, and also goes along with lots of other types of evidence and statistics, it can really help build an extra layer to what you're talking about. Imagery and figurative language that provides an emotional response, visual images or words to try to get people to empathize and have compassion. Powerful words, phrases, images that stir up emotion. Details that come from possible like subjective reporting. We see that in news a lot. I guess another example of an ad that might use pathos a little in a way is when we see celebrities a lot in advertisements. But that's not necessarily, sometimes we'll see that as almost like a reason to trust it, when in actuality, when you pull in a celebrity to endorse your product, a lot of times you're just pulling in a fancy name, someone that people admire, or someone like if it's, a model selling a product, is because you want to look like them. Like it's targeting an insecurity. It's bringing in someone you admire, want to look like, be like, emulate. And that's another appeal to emotion. We'll bring in celebrities to endorse political ideas, to get people to eat at restaurants, to do all kinds of things. That's another way that will appeal to emotion. Ethos is the writer. We've talked a lot about this. It's the way that you get your reader to see that you are trustworthy. It's ethic. It actually ethos translates to the word ethics, which isn't necessarily the same as morals, because morals are more based on personal values. When we're thinking about ethics, we're thinking more about having trustworthy character and credibility and having authority. There are two types of ethos. Extrinsic which is your personal credibility. In terms of your expertise and your authority. So it's whether or not you are a professor, or whether or not you're published, or whether or not you have professional experience in that field. Like it's your actual like expertise and background that you could record or state. Whereas intrinsic is more built into the writing. It's your fair-minded tone with other perspectives. It's your confidence in how you write, and in your own perspectives. It is your use of sources. It's built into the writing. So extrinsic is whether or not you are or not an expert in the issue, and intrinsic is what you're kind of focusing on in your essay, because you might not have specific expertise in that issue, but you're pulling in from outside sources. You're using a fair tone. You're addressing other perspectives. There's a lot of ways that you're sort of practicing this. You're citing your sources. You are practicing paraphrasing well and practicing academic argument. So that's really more what you're kind of focusing on. So a couple of other kind of examples just to kind of list some things out. Appealing to the writer or speakers like qualifications or character. So qualifications are more that extrinsic. Your credible use of sources is more coming out of the writing. It's intrinsic. Accurate citations, experience and authority. So, the person knows the issues or has experience in the field. So if that's you, that would be like an extrinsic example of expertise. Whether or not you're using appropriate language. So you're using the language of the discipline. That shows expertise. And that also has to do with intrinsic ethos. If you are using, the scholars, and you're using the expert terminology, and you're able to explain it well, it builds your trustworthiness. Having an appropriate tone, showing that you know the audience, you know the context of the situation, you're well versed. Humility, not being overly emotional and considering other perspectives fairly, like giving credit where credit's due. Tentative yet authoritative language. So you want to be authoritative, and you want to be authoritative, and you want to be confident, but you don't want to be absolute or sweeping, because that gets along the lines of being overly emotional. Everyone is doing this. This will always work. This is the only way to do it. People who believe that are always this, or never think this way, or never consider this. The research, you want to instead say things like, the research suggests that, some experts believe, in my experience, often this happens. Things that show that you are being fair and rational about how you're thinking about the situation. And then, correct use of grammar and language. That's where the grammar comes in too. If you're thinking about advertisements, the way we're going to practice, you might think about also like appealing to like reputation, like things that say like, I've been around, we've been proudly serving since 1893, because it's an established reputation. Appeal or relying on a well-known brand, or a name, that kind of thing. If they are bringing in experts, like not bringing in a celebrity to sell your weight loss product, but bringing in a doctor or a nutritionist, using a dentist to sell a toothpaste, that kind of thing. So we're going to go on to logos, which is the final of the 4. And it's kind of the base appeal for everything, because it is the text itself. And one of the ways I want to talk about like logos being the message and logos being logic, is that a list of facts is not logic. A list of facts might be evidence that you can use, but it's not necessarily logic in and of itself. Logic is having your message make sense, not necessarily getting the other side to completely agree with you or to win, as we've talked about with popular argument. It speaks back to the goal, like what we try to get to with academic argument, which is having the reader see how what you're saying makes sense and is worth considering. So it's a little bit more of a middle ground there in terms of pushing the conversation forward. You want what you're saying to make sense. So you want to have solid reasons that are believable. You want to have evidence that you can support those reasons with, and you want to have examples that you've come up with and explanations to help explain those ideas. Again, having reasons and having evidence is great, but if your readers don't understand the reasons and evidence, it doesn't make sense to them, then you've lost them. What you're saying needs to be fair, it needs to be logical, it needs to make sense. So you have to have the reason, you have to have the evidence, and then you have to have a way of making it make sense to your reader, of having examples and explanation and ways of talking about the evidence to your reader so that they can see that it makes sense. So you might have some of these types of evidence. You might have examples, you might have personal experience, historical precedents, you might have anecdotes and hypothetical situations. Again, a lot of that comes back to trying to explain kind of something you're trying to say. You might have expert support, facts, case studies, credible experiments, definitions of terms, explanation of the ideas and evidence you've presented. You might have some cause and effect type things. You might have details from objective reporting. You might have logical reasons and explanation, statistics, all kinds of things. Then the goal is to get something well-rounded. Again, just like you don't want to have personal experience, you don't just want to have case studies. You want to be able to combine several things together. So an expert support and statistics and your own examples, and be able to bring things together and be able to talk about it and explain it. That's at the heart of your argument, not the evidence that you copy and paste, but how you set it up and what you have to say about it is the heart of your argument. It is a little harder sometimes to find logos in advertisements. If you'll notice, we'll go back to the Jaguar commercial that we watched in class. It had lots of pathos, lots and lots of pathos. It did sort of have some implied ethos because it relied on the fact that you knew and already kind of trusted the name Jaguar and already knew what it was. So I had an established reputation. There wasn't a lot of logic, and we even talked about the fact that they actually say in the commercial that Gorgeous has no love for logic, which was convenient, again, because they didn't have any logic in the commercial, because the logic in that ad would have been talking about the car itself. Good reasons to buy the car, the quality of the car, things like that, and it was missing. So a lot of ads are really heavy on pathos and even sometimes on ethos, but not always on logos, because that actually means giving reasons and evidence for the product itself. It could be comparisons. So that before and after and that testimonial could be a good reason. It could also be ethos because, you know, you're getting a testimonial in there. You're bringing in someone who's used the product. So again, you can get more than one appeal in the same thing. It could be, so if you've ever shown seen the paper towel commercials where they show like how one, you know, works and one doesn't, assuming that those aren't staged, which of course they are, that would be an example of something you would use for, that would be evidence. When they show statistics, and you have to be careful with statistics because statistics, we love to see them, and they're actually they can be an emotional appeal too if they're, you know, surprising or shocking, but in advertisements, a lot of times you'll notice they throw them out there without a lot of like ways to know if you can trust them. For instance, like all toothpaste seem to be recommended by 9 out of 10 dentists, so that's a little sketchy. But again, sorry. But just you might notice in advertisements as you're coming across them, if they have reasons why that product is more convenient, why it's better, why it works, then that would be like logic in their message. And in your argument, in your essay, it's being able in each of your sections to have different types of evidence and being able to provide context and explanation and coming up with your own examples and ways of talking about and presenting the information, making what you're saying make sense to the reader.